This podcast is brought to you by Customplan Financial Advisors, Inc., an independent insurance managing general agency in Canada. Financialpodcast.ca was developed with one goal in mind: to educate Canadians on important topics that affect their financial well-being and make it readily available to all. We welcome you to plug in and learn with us. If you have questions, please email us at contact@financialpodcast.ca.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Podcast. My name is Gary Poyer. The Financial Podcast is brought to you by Customplan Financial Advisors, an award-winning managing general agency that provides exceptional support and resources to the independent financial advisor. Please visit customplanfinancial.com to see all of the resources that are available to you, the independent financial advisor. Today's podcast will be both interesting and, I think, entertaining, as we'll be reviewing the book Retired, Rewired, Not Expired, which is about the life and career of a man who's been in the life insurance and group benefits industry for almost 45 years. And I'm pleased to have with us today the author of the book, Mr. Joel Cadesky. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you very much, Gary, and I really appreciate the opportunity that you're giving me to talk about the book, and I'm very pleased to do this today.
Well, Joel, there's some great stories and great insight and value in the book, so I'm pleased to have you on our podcast again. This is actually, well, technically the third time that you're with us, because you participated in the series on success a few weeks ago. Joel, you've been on quite the journey for the last 77 years. So tell us, what made you write the book at this stage in your life?
I've been thinking about this, Gary, for a long time. And about 2.5 years ago, before the pandemic really got going, or maybe just about there, I started thinking about life and what I'm leaving behind and legacy and so forth. And I realized, and we'll go through it, I'm sure, during the conversation with you about it, that I really never got to know who my father and mother were. I knew who they were, but I didn't know all their inconsistencies. I didn't know their history as much. And I didn't want that for my kids and grandchildren. Like, I have 4 grandchildren. One's 8 years old. The other 3 are under 3 years of age. I'm 77. One has to be realistic about longevity. And I wanted them to know who I am and who I was and what they have and how I got it. And I also wanted my 2 children and their spouses to sort of know what I went through when they were growing up, my 2 children, because I just never knew that with my father. And I wanted to leave something behind for them. So 20 years from now, 30 years from now, they can read the book and they'll still be valid and mean something to them. I wish that my father and mother had written something that I could have like this, but they didn't. I'm hoping that this legacy will be something down the road for them.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go way back to your early childhood. And can you tell us what the environment was like in your home when you were growing up?
Oh, loving, loving, loving. My 2 parents were the best parents. I mean, everybody says that about theirs, hopefully. But I can tell you, my father and my mother were the most loving parents you could ever want. My father was silent. He was never affectionate, never coming out, but the things that he did to show me he loved me was there. My mother was the reverse, was hugging and kissing all the time. I love you, I love you. And the things that she did for me. It was a very safe home environment for me. And one that when my wife and I, had children, we wanted to do for our 2 children too. And I think it came from there for me because of what I had. My father, as you read in the book, was a self-employed scrap and metal dealer in Owen Sound, Ontario, Canada. He had one major competitor that was multi-wealthy. Didn't do it the proper way, wanted to buy my father out, wanted to go in partnership. My mother said, no, I'd rather have less money, but sleep at night. He didn't make a lot of money, but I can tell you, whenever we needed something, it was always there. Worked really, really hard, 6 days a week, sometimes 7, always 6 days a week, always there for his clients. There were some great stories that if you want to later on or now talk about, after his death, the story that somebody mentioned about the no handshake deal they had for 34 years, et cetera, et cetera. So to answer your question, it was just a great home to be living in.
Okay, I understand your father lived by a certain model. What was that model?
Oh, his motto was, "My word is my bond is my word." Never did a handshake never did a handshake deal that needed a contract written with it. If he told you something, you knew it was going to happen. And I've lived by that as well. So if I mention to somebody I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. You can't break the bond trust with people. You can't break the bond trust with clients. My dad had a very, very, very loyal clientele. And it's hard to think of people clientele in the scrap and metal business because he dealt with the mom and pops who used to come with their little bits of pieces of iron or steel, and he'd weigh it and give them the money and then sell it and send it off to Toronto every Wednesday. But his people loved him, and they respected him. And the people that he dealt with, the people at the bank when he died, had nothing but glory talking about him. Yeah. You have to remember back when he grew up, and again, this is part of the problem that I had. I didn't ask these questions, and I can't. But I would have liked to say, what was it like growing up in a small town, 17,500 people, small town, Ontario? Very few people, there was a Jewish community there. It was named after my grandfather, Beth Ezekiel Synagogue. The Jewish people were very close to each other, but there was still anti-Semitism everywhere. Right. And I talk about it in the book. But yet he survived, and he had respect, and he was able to succeed. And I wanted to know how he did that, because my dad was the first Jew to ever be allowed to be a Mason. And to be a Mason, you had to have 100% participation of everybody accepting you. If you had one person, they called it back then blackballing, you couldn't get in. He was the first Jew to get into the curling club, the first Jew to be in the Lions. How did that happen? I'll never know, because I never asked. Yeah. So it was really amazing that he was able to succeed that way. So his word had to be solid. His bond with the people had to be solid, because he knew he had so much going against him. And obviously, if he broke that, what would be the logical response? Well, that's what Jewish people do, right? It's quite obvious.
Yeah. In the book, Joel, you mentioned a couple of incidences that happened in your childhood. Could you tell us what they were and how they impacted you? Because you mentioned that you still remember them.
You know what? I remember them. In fact, as I'm looking at you now, my mind is visualizing coming out of the synagogue after class, looking for my bike. It was gone. It was stolen. Somebody knew every day after school, we would put our bikes there and go into Jewish school, come out, take the bikes and drive, go home. So that was something that I can still visualize. And the other one, which I cringe at every time I read it or talk about it, was when I was about, I think it was 10 years old. I went skating, which was about a block away from my aunt and house. And we went on a Saturday night, and one of my classmates from my public school, who I did not like, he did not like me because I was Jewish. Literally, we got into a fisticuff. And I can tell you, I'm a lover, hopefully, not a fighter. And I got the hell beaten out of me. And I remember to this day, I can still remember the alleyway that I walked. I can remember the darkness at nighttime. I remember banging on the door at my aunt. I can remember the blood coming down. It's still vivid. 60 some years later. And that was only because I was Jewish. It had nothing to do with my personality. So those two events, looking back on it now, makes it even more credible to know why and how my father was able to succeed in that environment.
Did you, jumping ahead like many decades, did you run into any anti-Semitism in your career, like other than your insurance career?
In my insurance career, no. In my teaching career, yes.
Yeah.
I can't remember an instance where somebody didn't deal with me or made a comment because of the Jewishness. But in my teaching career, before I got into insurance, absolutely. And I talk about a couple of the times that occurred.
Right. Okay. Well, let's flip back to your childhood a little bit. older childhood, but you talk about going to a summer camp, and that was a very positive experience in your life. So tell us about the positive aspect and the benefits that still exist to this day.
So you got to remember 1961, 60 plus years ago, there was a camp at Sudbury called Camp Billoween, and it was for people that belonged to an organization called Young Judea, and I belong to Young Judea in Owen Sound. And the availability to go there for 2 months to become a leader, to come back and teach the kids how to dance, how to sing Jewish songs and so forth, was very appealing to me. And my parents especially wanted me to go there. So I went there, and you have to remember, I was a klutzy guy who didn't know how to hammer, didn't know what camping was about. I never really got into that. And I was really... my parents took good care of me. I was in a bubble, so to speak. And all of a sudden, they take me to Toronto. I go on a train with a bunch of other people. We go to Sudbury, get up there. They pick us up, put us in a truck. We go to the camp, and the tents are on the ground, and we have to put them together. And I was put together with one other person from Vancouver, David. And we put the tents up, and we spent 2 months in a tent.
Wow.
And we learned all of the rudiments. But you have to remember, I was not like today, I was non-self-confident, very introverted. For people today watching this who know me would think that's crazy. But yeah, I was introverted back then. But I was taken in because we're all Jewish. We're all from all across Canada, literally from BC over to Nova Scotia. We even had one guy from Dick from the States who got in somehow. And for some reason, the top boys, the top guys, the ones you look at, it's sort of like if you look at MASH, the old MASH movies, everybody looked up to Hawkeye and BJ. Well, they looked up to these two guys. And for some reason, they liked me. And they took me under their wing. And I became part of the gang, part of the crew. And people respected me and listened to me and helped me. And I just developed as a person, a 16-year-old kid who turned into a man by the end of that 2 months. The best part about it was one of the people that took me under his wing was a guy named Barry Slosky. Now, Barry, to this day, and I still talk 61 years later. In fact, I just talked to him a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
And I talk about it in the book. There's a whole chapter on him and what he did and how he did it, because he was the glue that connected us after the years. Every Beloeem, and my sister went to a Beloeem in the late 50s. No Beloeem that I know of then and now ever had a cohesive group like we did that followed up 60 years or 50 years later and are still together. Wow. And we talk about the numerous trips that we made, and it was all organized. So that summer created something for me that if I wouldn't have gone, I wouldn't be the guy I am today. I more likely wouldn't even be in front of you today because I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Do you think your parents knew that it was an opportunity for you to really grow and develop?
100%.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. And I think more my mother than my father. I think that she realized that, I admit it. I have no qualms about telling people I was babied. I had everything I wanted. Everything she was provided for me. I mean, they were just, as I said, just phenomenal, loving parents. And I think she realized at age 16, you got to get out there. Age 15, 16, you got to get out into the world. And there's a better way of doing it. And 2 months away from home would be a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah. So is that camp still going?
Yes, it is, but it isn't in Sudbury now. I believe it's in Huntsville.
Okay.
But it is Camp Billoween. Oh, yeah. And it's a big, big deal to be there. Okay. It's still the same thing, the Young Judea, but not the way it was 60 years ago. 60 years ago, it really was. Now, you have to remember back then, we didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones. So the kids weren't on there. I've talked to parents whose kids go to camp, and apparently they confiscate the cell phones and give it to them once or whatever. Yeah. We never had that. And I wasn't in communication with my parents except for once. Because they lived, was a 3-4 hour drive from Sudbury, there was what they called a Parents' Day at the end of the first month.
Okay. And
my mother and father, you got to remember, this is 60 years ago. It wasn't the highways that they had to Sudbury from Owen Sound. It wasn't the highfalutin cars that we have today with, that's comfort. And my parents drove up to Sudbury to meet with me, and they brought enough food to feed the whole camp, I think, because we had so many kids coming over. My mother made this and they had that, and it was just like, wow, she was the mother for everybody. Because most of the kids who were from Halifax or BC, their parents obviously weren't going to be there. Right. And my mother put out a spread. They brought a table. They set it up. And I still remember kids to that day afterwards talking about my mother's food. Wow. So they made a big effort. But other than that, that was the only time I talked to them in 2 months. So I had to do what I had to do by myself. Now, I will tell you, the first couple of nights, I was so lonely and so unhappy. I really wanted to go home, but of course, they weren't going to let you. Mm-hmm. As the time went going on, and Barry Slosky and Jeff Groberman and a few other guys took me under their wing, it got better and better. So by the end of the summer, I didn't want to come home. I was having too good a time. I enjoyed the people there. I became bigger, more of a person, a man. I was looked at with respect. I never had that before. Yeah. And it was good to be among Jewish people for 2 months as well. That was also a big bonus.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you really grew. I was going to ask you who missed each other more, whether you missed your parents more or whether they missed you more. But it sounds like maybe it was a saw off, and then.
No, I think I missed them more. I think that they sort of, after they saw me for the first month, that was good enough for them, and they could live without me for another month.
Yeah. And they still had your sister, right? So, Joel, I want to ask you, during your summer breaks from university, you learned a lot about people and how to treat people. And I'm talking about your summer jobs there. Yeah. So tell us about the people you worked with, what you learned from Mr. Taylor, and how this experience impacted you in your insurance and group benefits career.
So the first job I had in the summertime was a hydrometer, and I just went around and read the numbers and came back, and I didn't really interact with people. But the second time after that, the next year when I was coming back, I was working as a garbage collector. And I'm talking the real garbage collector, not the guys today, the soft touch they have, where all they do is pick up a can, throw it in the back, press a button, go on to the next one. We actually had 4 of us. We had one driver, we had 2 people on the ground picking up the garbage, and we had one guy in the top. And we used to hand it to him. He used to empty it and hand it back. Now, remember, we never had recycling bins like we have today. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the little green bins. We just had garbage cans. Some were metal, some were tin, some were plastic, whatever. Yeah. Some were just bags. Didn't care. And recycling was not a big deal. So everything was put together. So the guys that I worked with had been in the garbage for a long time. In fact, I remember them as a kid in Owen Sound, seeing them. I mean, Freddie Fox was one guy. When I first met him, it was like saying hello to a hero. Freddie, how are you doing? I mean, Freddie had been there over 35 years and still going. But what I learned from them was they're all uneducated. But yet they were educated. And I'll explain what I mean by that. They didn't go to school, most of them. They didn't go to university, all of them. But boy, oh boy, did they know what life was about. And they had an education because they knew. So I learned very early on with these guys, do not treat these guys as imbeciles. These guys are smart guys. They just didn't have the opportunity to get a better job. And to them, this was a great job. They could tell you every Tuesday at 3:30 where they're going to be. They had it down pat. But what they did was it taught me to treat the blue-collar worker with respect, because these guys were hardworking, family-loving, except for Sparky, who never got married. And I talk about Sparky in the book. But other than that, all these guys were married, loved their families, worked hard at a really, really tough job. Wintertime, I never worked with them, but wintertime collecting garbage in Owen Sound was no fun, being up on top of a truck with ice, and you got to get down after you built your mound. Yeah. So it helped me in the insurance, because when I deal with people that are quote unquote blue collar, they're not the white collar people. I treat them like everybody else because I remember. And you know what? Some guys that I have as clients that are blue collar, very intelligent guys. They just wanted to go into a blue collar job. Yeah. Now, Mr. Taylor was a really good lesson for me, because the first time I went there, he didn't know who I was, and he wanted to know who I was. So I introduced myself and that. And we were told he owned a pop place, Taylor's Pop. and they manufactured pop, just like Pepsi and that, except it was Taylor's pop. Yeah. And he asked me one day, he says, well, what do you think about this? And I said, this is really good. And he said, what's your favorite? And I said, I really like the cherry pop type of thing. And he said, okay, from then on, I had one there every day. It was always there, free, as much as I wanted. And he knew what I wanted. And he made sure it was stock. And I learned from him that you find out what the needs of your client are and what your wants, and you satisfy them. I really like that pop. I used to buy it, by the way, because you used to buy it in convenience stores. And I told him that. Sure enough, you had it for us. The other thing I learned from Mr. Taylor was there was something about him, successful businessman, small town, but yet he had an affinity for the garbage guys. They told me stories of how he treated them. Always free pop, always cold, always there, whatever you want, take, will never, ever charge you. And there was something about the garbage guys he liked. And I think it was because they were salt of the earth guys. And he really liked that. And I could tell with his employees, he treated them well too. So the lesson I learned from him was just treat everybody equal. There is nobody better. Education, money doesn't make it you a better person.
No, that's for sure. And moving a little further along in your life, what did you learn from your group dynamics class that was taught by, you say Dr. Ted H. I'm not sure what the H stands for.
Dr. Hadwin, Ted Hadwin.
Okay. And how have you applied this in your life and career?
Oh, I wouldn't have been in teaching except for Ted Hadwin. I wasn't floundering at university, but I didn't have any direction where I wanted to be. And I was at University of Guelph. The last semester, I took this group dynamics course because I was majoring in sociology, and Ted Hadwin walked in. First thing he said was, everybody's going to pass. That's it. If you want a higher mark, stay. If you want a lower mark, leave. Because you'll get your 60, but no better. Nobody left, everybody stayed. And he basically said, this is it. We're just going to talk. And all we did every day, every class, in a circle, and he'd bring up a topic and we'd just talk. And I learned from that if you listen to other people, you find out a lot. So a lot of it was good listening skills. So when the class was over, we had to write an essay, and I wrote an essay and got a good mark on it. I decided to go into teaching because what better group dynamics is there than a class full of kids? So I went to teaching, got my certificate, started teaching, and I used Dr. Ted Hadwin for my English composition class first year. And it set the tone because in that, it was really good. The kids at the end of the year, I just said, your marks are finished. No more. Here they are. I actually showed them the report cards, put them in an envelope. So I said, whatever you guys want to do now for the next couple of weeks in this class, and we did it every day. And it was amazing what we got out of it. When I got into insurance, I applied the same principle where if you listen a lot, you don't talk a lot, and you're in a group, because I did a lot until COVID. I did a lot of employee meetings, and I would literally have them all together around, and we would talk. And I would listen to their concerns. Well, we don't have enough dental, we don't have this, and you work it out. So the Ted Hadwin thing really helped me because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have got into teaching, which means I wouldn't have got into insurance, which means I wouldn't be here today.
Right. It's kind of interesting that you chose the group work because even when you went into insurance, you were still teaching in a way, right? You were teaching financial literacy more than selling. I mean, you got paid through the sale, but you were still teaching. But so you were a teacher for 9 years. It sounded like you were a very successful teacher. Why did you leave the teaching profession?
People that know me very well is I've got a very good streak of obstinance in my background and who I am. And one of the things is that I don't like processes. I just like to do my thing. One of the things I loved to do in teaching was I loved to just sit in the classroom, close the door, be my own man. But then again, we had processes, we had marks, we had the superintendent. But I always loved teaching, and I always loved phys ed, and I was teaching phys ed for 7 years, physical education. And I got a degree from the University of Guelph in it, a certificate. And I wanted to become a head of a department. And I found out there was a good teaching position about 10 miles away from where I was living and teaching. And I applied for it. And it was on the basis of one of my friends there telling me, guess what? This opening is for you. I mean, this is tailor-made. Found out I couldn't get it. Now, you got to remember, this is going back into the late 70s, 1978. And I went to the principal and I said, what happened? I was told this. Is it true? This was, Gary, and believe it or not, try that today, I got vetoed by my principal. The other principal phoned them up and said, we got this application from Joel Cadesky. Okay to take him? Because I really want him. No, he's going to stay here. Goodbye. Okay, we'll go somebody else. So I told the principal and he agreed. He said, you're my best teacher. And I got a few more years to go before retirement. And I don't want to lose you. And guess what? I can do it. So I said, well, how do I get out of here? So he gave me two options, one which I won't mention. The other one was retire. So went home, said to my wife, who's from Toronto, you want to be in Toronto? Go get a job, and I'm out of here. She got a job and said goodbye, and that was it. Came to Toronto, no job, no place to live, no nothing, just got out of there. So that's how I got out of teaching. Very, very simple. If I would have got the teaching position in the other place for phys ed, I would have still been there and finished my career. Yeah. It's interesting how things, if you've noticed already, we talked, wasn't for Ted Hatwin, I wouldn't have got into teaching. If it wasn't for that principal, I wouldn't have got into insurance. Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be a catalyst of some sort in your life. But okay, so let's look at your arrival in Toronto. So you tell a story in the book that when you and your wife purchased your home in Toronto, the realtor earned her money. So how did she earn her money, and what lesson did you learn that you've applied in your career?
She was an amazing realtor. She was the ultimate salesperson because she knew her client. So our story was very, very simple. I didn't have a job. I didn't have very much money in the bank because I didn't make very much money at teaching. My wife had just started her job, so we had but the one thing I did have going for me was I did have an unemployment insurance every 2 weeks coming through. And I talk in the story how I got that. Yeah. So what I said to her was, this is my income. Now, you couldn't go to a bank because I had no job. But what she did was she knew of a friend of hers that was selling his house for duress because of his heart condition. He had to get out of the house. And she went to him, and it wasn't even on MLS. It wasn't even out. She just heard about it through the grapevine, phoned him up. And we had an evening one night where we sat with him and her and his wife. And she laid out the case. And she basically said, I want you to take back a vendor take-back mortgage. And I want you to do it for this amount of money. And he said, why? And she said, this was the key part. She said, do you remember years ago when you started out and bought this home? I know, because remember, they were friends. I know you didn't have very much money. And the person that you bought the home from, they helped you out. I'm asking you to do the same thing for these two kids. And she used that word kids because we were young. We really were, early third. And he said, do I have guarantees that we will get the money? And I said, here's my unemployment insurance coming in like clockwork. When I finally get a job, I'll be able to pay you. So he took back a vendor take-back mortgage over 40 years. 40 years. Imagine I paid off zero on principal, was all interest. But guess what? We got into our home, and you know what? We're still there, same home.
Wow, that's amazing.
So you asked the question, what did I learn from her? I learned, which I do many, many times in my career for my clients, you don't stop at no, and you keep on going until you get the answer. And she solved the problem by coming around a different route. It was her that came up, not me. It was her that knew we were good for the money because of the unemployment insurance. How did you figure it out? You go, and then you also reason with the guy. And I cannot tell you how many times I present a case to an insurance company and I use reasoning. Mm-hmm. Here's the reason why. Mm-hmm. And if it makes sense, they're going to accept it. So I learned so much from her that night, not knowing that I learned from her, but now you look back and you talk about it, and I wrote the book about it. She just knew what to do to get us that house.
Yeah. Like when I read that section, I thought, she was good at the art of negotiation. right?
Yes.
First of all, when you and your wife walked through the house, you said that you weren't maybe struck by it, but then she had said, "Can you picture yourself or vision yourself?" So she was good at creating that vision or helping you create that vision, and then negotiating. And I thought that was
and that's part of a good salesperson, is that you create the vision for the client of what's in it for you. Forget about what you see. What can you see down the road? For example, the dining room had bright red walls. Now imagine sitting there looking at that. We got rid of that the first week we moved in. We painted it over with the cup. But she was right. Forget what you see. Look down the road. What do you want to see in this house?
Yeah, exactly. And you obviously had to do that in your insurance career, saying, like, don't look at how your health is today, like how it might be in the future, or your spouse's. So, Joe, I just want to read this so I get it right. So when you first started with Crown Life, you wrote in the book, "This was the first time in my life that I never had a guaranteed salary, and to say the least, I was frightened. I've never sold in my life, and I didn't know anything about sales, while the intricacies and nuances of insurance certainly escaped me." Given these statements, what was it that made you move forward and sign the contract being offered to you by Crown Life?
Very simple. I needed a job. As simple as that. And they offered a good contract at the time. It was going to cover my mortgage, which was great. And I had some money left over. And I liked the people there. The manager, Leo, and his assistant, Bunny, treated me well. And it was like family. Actually, Leo took me and my wife out one evening with his wife. And it was just a little social event to a nice restaurant, but it was more to see who my wife was, because as it came out later, and I learned really early in my career, the person that is at home while you're out banging on doors is so important. And if she's not supportive, you're finished. And some of the most unsuccessful guys that I've known in the business have had divorces, were not having a good relationship with the spouse, non-supportive or whatever. That I cannot say with my wife. She supported me from day. In fact, she's the one who told me take the job, because she said, they're nice people, they'll treat you well. And they did. Yeah. And also not because, but it also influenced me. It was pretty well a predominantly Jewish organization. The manager, the assistant manager, some of the other people there were all Jewish. I mean, we had some other people too, which I talk about. We had somebody who was Italian, but the majority of it was. So that was a homey atmosphere for me, very homey.
Right. Okay. Well, tell us about Leo and what you learned from Leo that you've applied in your life and your career.
Leo took a neophyte, and I found out after I took the job, I was the first non-insurance person that they recruited into there in years. Nobody could remember another one. Leo was known as the Pirate King. Pirating meant he would go to other brokerages, find somebody like Gary, who's a top producer, and induce him to come to his. So he was having one of the number one or number two branches in all of Crown Life every year, because he always recruited the top guys. And I talk about him.
Yeah. He
took a chance on me. Don't ask me why. To this day, I still don't know why he would break the mold and say, well, I'll take a neophyte. Because as I put in the book, I didn't get much training. So it wasn't because I'm going to mold him in my fashion. For some reason, he saw something in me that made him say, I'm going to take a chance. And I learned from him that you treat people with respect. We never had an argument. Even when at the end of the first year, I was in a deficit, I didn't sell what they were paying me. Mm-hmm. Every Friday, we'd always go into his office before the end of the week and I didn't do it, but they were drinking. They would have a drink, and we'd just talk about anything and everything, not necessarily about sales. And it was a homey atmosphere. You wanted to go to work for him. That was important. That was really important. So what did I learn from Leo? I just learned you treat people with respect. You understand who they are, and you give people chances.
Right. Okay. Well, it sounds like Leo was very relationship focused. And in your book, you talk a lot about relationships, both with your clients, but also with a lot of the group reps. So what made you go down that path of seeking out the group reps and getting to know them?
Again, this was just part and parcel of my personality. And I think I learned that from my father too, because, and again, it just comes by osmosis. And as we're talking now, it comes out in my mind. He got to know all the people he dealt with, the higher ups, like the person at that company that he had for 34 years taking away their waste. He got to know that guy really well. I remember before Christmas every year, never could understand it till I got into insurance. But my father was out for about 2-3 weeks every night. He was going to visit people that he dealt with just to give them a bottle, sit and talk. How are you? Thank you for the business. And he developed, and they know who he was. So when I got in the insurance business, I was told by one of the key people at KRG, once I got to KRG from Crown Life, Stephen said, get to know your reps because they'll make or break you. So I got to know them. But guess what? I found out they were really nice guys. And the three that I mentioned most in the book, I developed such a relationship. In fact, one of them, Jim, I just posted on LinkedIn. We had a lunch together with some of my other reps that I've had over the years. And we had a lunch last week and I posted it on LinkedIn. And I've known Jim for 40 years. Wow. And still know him, socialize with him.
Wow.
I think the group reps to me make the difference. And if you don't have a relationship with them in the insurance business, you're sunk because they're the conduit to the insurance company. I can't go directly to them. I got to go through them. And I tell good stories about them. Some fun. Oh, man, we had so much fun, the three of us.
Yeah, for sure. You just mentioned about getting to know the higher ups in the company. So speak to the importance of mentoring, because you mentored a couple of people as well. So how important is mentoring, and what were the results of you mentoring a couple of other people?
So one of them was Marnie, and Marnie worked, and she was with me for about a year. I taught her the group insurance. She literally went on appointments with me, and every time we went from one appointment to another, we would talk about what happened, where we're going, what happened. We didn't do this every day, but we did it on a regular basis. I think it was once a week or twice a week. And now she left where she was, and she's now the head of a unit in a very large insurance situation. And she teaches and talks to other brokers. And what I taught her, she teaches them. The other one was a gentleman who is basically life insurance and investment oriented, but he wanted to get in the group business. So I sort of mentored him, and he would phone me up all the time. What's the answer to this? Even on life insurance, which he did, I got a client like this, help me out. The key to what I wanted to do with these was just to do what I was told. I was taught. So teach somebody else, and hopefully they'll make somebody else better. And that's the whole key, giving. The one thing about the insurance industry I really love, I will talk to any insurance person and I will give them everything that I know, as long as they don't do one thing, take my clients. Get your clients, leave mine alone. I'll give you all. And if I make you $1 million, I'm happy. I don't want a penny. Makes me feel good, but don't ever go after any of my clients. And that's the rule, and it's worked out well.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty fair rule. Joel, you also talked about the importance of referrals. And referrals seem to be something that a lot of financial professionals struggle with. For whatever reason, they don't ask. So how did you start asking for referrals, or what is your secret to getting referrals?
I don't have one. I'm like everybody else. I struggle to get them as well as best you can. But I think what came from the referrals that I got was people wanted to help me, and they wanted to help their friends. So a lot of the referrals that I got were from people who said, I'm unhappy with my insurance. Oh, I got the guy for you. Mm-hmm. And I would get an email, phone this guy, and I'd phone him in 10 minutes. And then I would report back and say, just spoke to him. Yeah, I know. Yeah, he couldn't believe you phoned him back so quickly. Referrals, I know people that have been successful on referrals. I just found that if you ask for it, they'll all say, yeah, I'll give it to you. If you ask them for some names, they might give it to you. But that's not really what you really want. Is you want it to come warm. You want it to come from the guy who introduced you or the lady. You want them to phone you and say, I heard about you. I want to deal with you. And a lot of my referrals have come that way. I can't remember in my career where I asked for a referral and somebody gave me one and I phoned them and it worked out well. Just never happened.
Okay.
Now, I'll give you a funny story. Back in the Crown Life days, at the back of everything, the application, they used to have a sheet. It was part of the application which you pulled away, and it was the referral sheet. And you gave it to the client, said, put the 3 names down, phone number. There was no email address at the time.
Yeah.
They found out that most guys never did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
It's a tough thing to ask for referrals, because if the guy says, if your client says no, that's a negative, and you go, oh, geez, he doesn't want to refer me. If you ask yes, you put the guy on the spot.
Yeah.
So it's a tough thing to do. I think you earn the referral more than ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. During the, your insurance career, or even just in life, there's lots of ups and downs, lots of adversity. We make mistakes. How do you view mistakes?
How do I do mistakes?
How do you view mistakes? How do you see mistakes? Are they good, bad?
Oh, mistakes are all positive.
Okay.
Oh yeah, every negative is always a positive because you learn from them, and that's the key. You got to learn from your mistakes. Don't do the same thing twice. I always tell people that I work with at insurance companies that are back office that does reports for me, or people in the staff that I work with. I don't mind if you make a mistake. I love it. Just don't do it twice, because learn from it so you don't do it twice. I've never tried to ever do the same thing twice. That was a mistake. You learn from it. Yeah. So I love mistakes. I love negativity on that part, because you learn from it. If you screw up once, you'll learn not to do it twice. And that's the key to success. And, it's just important.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. A lot of people, they're afraid to try something because they're afraid of doing it wrong.
Well, remember Colonel Sanders? How many years did he try to get that secret recipe? And he started, what was it, age 66?
Yeah.
You know what? He got a lot of negatives.
Yeah.
Until he finally was able to get that out there and get it out to the public. I think the other problem is with people in sales. Most sales guys, even though they're outgoing, most of them are introverts, and they don't like negativity. They only want the positives. When the client buys, that's a positive. When the client says, I'll think about it, they go into a shell. And they're really, really, really good, excellent salespeople that I've known over my career. They look at every negative as a positive. Yeah. It's one step forward. I had a funny story that I tell sometimes, where when I started on the insurance, I would phone somebody and talk to them, and they would say, not interested. And I'd say, great. What do you mean great? Well, sir, 1 out of every 3 people will meet me and buy from me. The guy that I just phoned before you said no. You just said no. So please hang up. Let me phone the 3rd guy, because I know he's going to buy from me. In most cases, they laughed. In most cases, I got the appointment. So don't be afraid to get a no, because a no usually will lead to a yes.
Yeah.
I once had a manager at a former company tell me, no is not in my vocabulary. Find a way to get a yes. You know what? Just don't accept no.
Yeah.
Not good enough.
Yeah, that's very true. Joel, you really focus on the service aspect of your career in the book. There's lots of stories about how you service people. So tell me, how do you show your clients that you have their best interests at heart? So give me some examples of how you service clients that are, way beyond the ordinary.
I tell every prospect who turns into a client, it's a very simple thing. I'm not here to give you baseball tickets. I'm not here to give you hockey tickets. I'm not going to go golfing with you. I'm not going to take you for lunch. But if you want phone calls returned within 2 hours, if you want emails returned within 2 hours, if you'd like to phone me at 8 o'clock at night and get me, not a Memorex, at that time Memorex, you got the guy. If you need somebody to go to bat for you on anything, I'll go to bat for you. If you need a referral, say you want to buy a car and you don't know a good car dealer, I'll find you one. So what I've done basically is say, I want to be different than anybody else. I don't work 9 to 5. In fact, I try to put myself out as the 7-11 insurance guy, 7 in the morning till 11 at night, 7 days a week.
Oh.
So that's the key to service. So that's how I purport to show client service. And then examples are very straightforward. I remember I've done this more than once, where an insurance company will give a renewal on a group of -3. I think it would have been worth -7 or 8. So I'll phone the client up and I'll say, I got you a -3. Are you happy? Oh, yeah, I'm very happy. I said, well, I'm not. I negotiated a -8. I didn't have to do that, but I felt better for the client, so I serviced them. I've had clients who have phoned me up and said, would you speak to my doctor? Would you speak to my pharmacist? I'm happy to speak to anybody and anything, as long as I got permission. Most brokers don't want to do that. They don't want to talk. I'm involved in every renewal. I'm involved in everything with my clients. I service the heck out of them because they know that. I also am in trouble with a lot of insurance companies because I tell my clients, and all my employees, by the way, all my employees have my cell number and my email address. I got a phone call 3 days ago on the weekend from a client at 8 o'clock at night with a problem. He phoned me on my cell. I gave him the answer. The last thing I said to him was, after he thanked me, I said, don't thank me. Go back to your boss and tell him what I just did, because that tells them that I'm doing what I promised. I take phone calls 7 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah, Joel, I think a great example is, and you've got tons of great examples in the book, but tell us about the story where he had sold some life insurance to a gentleman. He was then diagnosed with, I think, cancer, but tell us what he told his wife, and then what his wife had told you.
Basically, I think you're talking about the, I know which one you're talking about. The one where he basically told his wife, when I die, call Joel and he'll get you the money.
Right.
And I did.
Yeah. And how long ago had you talked to him before this happened?
25 years. Easy. Yeah. Because he only bought one policy from me. He only wanted one policy when he died to pay for the death benefit, which it did. That was all he wanted. Didn't want anything more. Never could get him to buy any more, so I never did.
Yeah.
But I did follow them. I knew where they moved because they were eventually moved up to Northern Ontario. And I did know where they moved. I kept in touch with them on that type of thing, but I never talked to them about insurance, and I never really kept in touch. I find, But another funny story was in relationships with that, which I may or may not have told you, is I actually had a phone call from maybe an 18, 19-year-old boy. And he said, Mr. Cadesky, my mother said when she dies, I'm to phone you and you'll give me the money. And I said, yes, that's true. I need to know when your mother died. Well, the coroner just left, so it'll be about an hour ago. And he says, when this afternoon can you bring me the money? So I tried to explain to him how the insurance, but his mother said, call Mr. Cadesky when I die. Well, he took her at face value. She died this morning, 10 minutes. Here's the phone call to Joel. Bring the money this afternoon.
It's small bills. So that's funny. A lot of insurance people kind of shy away from delivering checks to beneficiaries because it can be hard because you don't know how the reaction is going to be of the beneficiary. Tell us about the one where she didn't want to meet with you, but then she finally did, and what she said about her husband.
So this was an interesting honor referral. I did a husband and wife insurance. And unfortunately, the husband died at age 65 or 66, in my mind now, very young. So I needed to get the paperwork done, which she did. I had to get the beneficiary to sign off, which she did. That was fine. And then I got the check. Couldn't get her to meet with me. Kept phoning and phoning and phoning and phoning. So finally, I phoned the daughter and I said, look, I got this check. I got to deliver it. That's my fiduciary duty. And she said, well, just come to the store. They had a bakery. She said, come to the store and at this time, and I'll make sure mom is there. So she comes in and the wife sees me, the beneficiary. She said, what are you doing here? We don't have a meeting. I said, well, your daughter arranged it. And of course, the daughter explained to him, Mom, Joel's got the check. So I gave her the check and she looked at it. She had to sign off. And she signed off finally because the daughter said, you got to do it. You can't, Joel's not leaving until you sign it. And then she looked at me with almost tears in her eyes and said, I guess now he really is dead. Because in her mind, he was just away on a vacation. He was going to come back. Now the reality of seeing the check in front of her, the dollar value, his name, the whole bit, made it reality.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. And you mentioned another story about a 16-year-old. In a situation like that, maybe you can tell us about the 16-year-old. She was the daughter of a group client, and she had an accident. She fell off the balcony.
Yeah. That was a long time ago. That was with Transamerica Life, when Transamerica Life did, you know how many, I had to go back. That was over 30, 35 years ago.
Okay.
What happened on that one was I got a phone call from the mother and said, you know, there's group insurance benefits for dependents. And I said, yeah, and children. She says, well, my daughter died. And I said, was it cancer, heart? No. She threw herself off a balcony. She got into drugs and just fell overboard. They were living in an apartment and fell out. And I had to go to the mother and give her the check. That was a tough one because the way that she died was, you know, that was just, you just don't expect one of your children that age to die throwing herself off a balcony because of drugs.
Yeah, it's tragic. So,
but I also had another one just as tragic where a father was on one of those ATVs and he didn't put a helmet on his son, and they were on it together, and he had a big, you know, he's a very big area that he was on, and they hit a rock and the kid fell up, banged his head and died. He was 3 years old. Wow. I had to deliver that check to him. Talk about guilt. Whew, that was a tough one.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's, you know, when you're in the insurance business, you do come across a lot of different situations. Yeah, and then there's another story where you delivered a death claim for $350, and the woman, the beneficiary, expected more.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? It's a funny story. We have a saying in the insurance business: while you're alive, you're overinsured. When you die, you're underinsured. So I delivered. Now, this wasn't my client. This was one that they gave me as a orphan. Nobody else wanted to deliver it, so they gave it to me. So I went to the house, gave her the check, and she said, I'm not taking it. I said, why not? She says, I know there's another 150 somewhere. It's a $500,000 he bought. I said, well, if you show me the paperwork, I'll get it for you. And she went upstairs. So I thought she was going upstairs to get the paperwork. She never came back down. So I just left the check on the table after about 10, 15 minutes and walked out. I never heard from the insurance company, so I guess it never got stale dated. I guess she cashed it.
Yeah.
But you know, the funny part, in quotation marks, funny, you don't know the reaction of the people when you deliver the death claim check.
Yeah.
Some have been absolutely horrendous to do, and others have been, you know, like, it is what it is. Let's, you know, part of life. Thank you for the job you did, and let's go on with life. I mean, I think I told you about the one that I delivered in the book. I remember the one I went to Kitchener in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
And delivered that. And talk about referral. I got a referral from her. It was her when she got remarried. Called me up and said, I want you to come. I got remarried. I want you to do the insurance on my husband.
Yeah. Well,
so again, that was earning a referral by doing the job that you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I encourage our audience to buy your book and read all the stories, because there's some humorous ones, and there's some examples of insurance that are way beyond the usual call of duty. So you definitely go the extra mile. So Joel, getting close to the end here, how do you want to be remembered? So when you're on your deathbed, what do you want to be able to say to yourself as you look back over your life?
Good father, good husband, serviced the heck out of clients, respected all my clients, treated people as equals, nobody worse, nobody better, left something behind better than when I came, 77 years or plus, whatever it is, when I die. And the world is better because Joel Cadesky was in it. And a lot of people, hopefully, that I met and touched and did things with professionally and not professionally, were better for it because they met me. But the most important part, I want to be remembered as a good father and a good husband and a good grandfather.
And so if I brought your son or daughter in here, or your grandchildren, do you think that they would say those same words that you just said about you?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, I think so too. Just, you know, reading your story, I think you have lived a life like you just described, and so you should be proud of what you've accomplished, and I'm pretty darn sure your family's pretty proud of you as well.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I had somebody who bought my book, read it, and called me and said, I'm sure if your mother and father could read your book and looking down from above, they would be very proud of what you did and accomplished after they passed away. Because my father died in 87, my mother died in 96. So it's been a long time, and I've done a lot in those years. So I feel good about that. That was a nice compliment. And that's the way I want to be remembered too. You know, hopefully 25, 30 years from now, somebody will read my book and say to my kids, you know what? He had a good life. He treated you well. He did it well. Everybody, you know, it's a good deal. We're a good man.
Yeah. And by creating the book, writing the book, you've left your own personal legacy in a tangible form. And, you know, generations from now, they can pick up your book and read all about Mr. Joel Cadesky. And that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, you can't ask for much more than that, Gary. I mean, I've known so many people since I've written the book who have told me, oh, I got a book, but I never did it. It does take effort to do it. I mean, it was like 2.5 years of hard work, writing and writing. But you know what? If you believe in something, which I did, I believe that I wanted this book out, not for the world to read, which is great. I'm happy. But I wanted it for my kids and my grandkids, because that's the important thing. And my wife too, but she had already read most of it anyways. But I wanted and it's there. I've done it. You know, I can be very proud of saying I started something, I've done it. And guess what? 30, 40, 50 years from now, that book will still be valid. Still be valid. And my kids will be looking at it and saying, wow, I forgot about that about him.
Yeah. Yeah. What about your wife? Is Nancy writing a book?
No, I don't think she wants to do that. She saw what I went through, and I think that she's just as happy to have me do it as part of the family, and that's it.
Well, you know what? She should record something on tape or on a you know, whatever the technology is today on a CD, because I mean, she was there supporting you, and your children and grandchildren, and maybe yourself, could learn a lot from her perspective about your career. So it's an idea that hasn't not been floated, but we'll see. You never know. Maybe next year, the year after, when things die down, we'll see what happens. But it's not a bad idea for people to put down either in writing like I did and get it out, or just write about it and or say it and put it on tape or whatever, because we don't have enough of that out there. A lot of people are afraid. I mean, I'll be honest with you. You and I had talked about this before. Writing this book was scary for me, frightening. More frightening for me was when it got published and it actually went live. I was frightened the day that it went out to market and everybody knew about it and how to buy it. Because you've read the book twice, not once, I know. Yeah.
And you know that there isn't anything there that I haven't. I mean, I've been as transparent about my life as anybody could be. The good, the bad, the ugly, the sad.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there about me that people didn't know, and they're going to look at it and go, wow. And I was concerned about that until somebody once said to me, how old are you? And I said, almost 77 at that time, yeah. And he said, do you really care about what people think about the book? And I said, well, I like them to like it. He said, yeah, but you really care if somebody doesn't like something about it? I said, not really. He said, good, because you told your story. Some people are going to like it. Some people are not going to like it. So what's the difference? Yeah. And once I did that, I came to a peace with my mind. But I can tell you, 3 weeks ago, I was not a basket case, but I was so nervous when that went live, because it was sort of like, well, yeah, we had a year delay. This was supposed to have been out in January 2021. So we almost had a year delay, but because of processes that if people want to know about writing a book, call me. I'll tell you all about it, the good, the bad. There's so many things you don't think about. And once it got out there and it was real, and I actually saw the book cover, and I go, wow, no, it really is can I take it back? Maybe I should just keep it, but it's out there, and I'm happy with the product, and I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time who buys the book about any section like we did today. Right. And it's just good. It's a relief off my mind that it's out there, and it's a relief off my mind so far, Gary. Now, who knows, 6 weeks from now, I may have a different story, but everybody that's bought the book and has read has always said to me they really enjoyed it. And that's what I really want. I always tell people, enjoy the book. You may not like some of the stuff that are in there, like some of the stuff about the life insurance, uncomfortable, but they enjoyed it. It was a good read. It was like you and I are talking. And that's what I wanted to do too. That was my style too. I wanted each chapter to be like you and I are just talking about, like today.
Yeah.
I didn't want it highfalutin words. I didn't want it to be above everybody.
No, it's an excellent read. I found it both interesting and entertaining. So I encourage everybody to pick up a copy. But we're going to have to wrap up, Joel. We're just about out of time. I want to thank you again for being our guest.
My pleasure.
And for telling us about the book, about your life, your career, and about having the courage to do so, because you do kind of expose yourself, and you did a great job. So it's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
If the audience want to get a copy of the book or get in touch with you, how can they do that? What's the best?
Well, the easiest way to do it is the publisher is Friesen Press, Friesen Press.com. Go on there and you can buy the book. Or it's in Amazon, Indigo, Barnes & Noble, pretty well anywhere books are sold online.
Okay.
And if they want to email me, they can go on my LinkedIn, or they can email me at jcadesky@gmail.com.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay. Excellent.
So,
okay. I want to thank our sponsor once more, Customplan Financial Advisors. Customplan Financial Advisors is an award-winning MGA providing exceptional support and resources to the independent financial advisor. Please visit their website at customplanfinancial.com. This podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and at financialpodcast.ca. To be notified directly when new podcasts are available, please subscribe by visiting financialpodcast.ca. If you have an idea or a topic for a podcast, or know of someone like Joel who would make a great guest, please send me an email to info@financialpodcast.ca. We love to receive your feedback. Thank you again, Joel, for being our guest.
my pleasure. Thank you.
And when your second book comes out, let us know. And to everyone else, have a fabulous day.
Thank you very much, Gary. Appreciate it.
The views expressed here are those of the participants and not those of Customplan Financial Advisors, Inc., its affiliates, or subsidiaries. This is not intended to serve as a complete analysis of every material fact regarding any company, industry, or security. This presentation may contain forward-looking statements. Investors are cautioned not to place undue reliance on such statements, as actual results could vary. This site and podcasts are for general information purposes only and does not constitute investment advice and is not intended as an endorsement of any specific investment product or service. Individual investors should consult with an investment professional about their personal situation. Past performance is not indicative of future results. If you are unsure about what is the best course of action for you in your financial planning, then we suggest you consult a fee-based independent financial advisor or get in touch with us to discuss your individual situation. Our phone number is 604-687-7773.